This is Back Roads of Illinois server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest. Today is edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were bringing you lasted for farming sources and information sponsored by AgriGold. We're glad you're here on a Wednesday afternoon. I am Cesar Delgado. I am your host of today's program on Back Roads of Illinois. I will be interviewing with Brian Summa from the USDA field office in St. Louis. Then I will have Nick Lawrence from Traders PhD on today about the commodities markets with Nick. Otherwise, this is your rural news sponsored by AgriGold. The Farm Bill is stalling to the Senate and the House. That's what it takes to cease to the passage of the Farm Bill for this Congress. Then Chuck Grassley say that we have 8 years Farm Bill for this moment. The tariffs and ag economic stock markets is getting worse than expected. Some experts say that the economy is going to be watching for the labor, trade deficit, inflation rate, the job markets for next few weeks. Finally, Illinois is going to be sunny and warm, with temperature of 80 in central Illinois on Friday. That's your rural news for this afternoon. This is your commodities markets update for this afternoon, sponsored by Kyle Bumstead from Allendale Incorporated. May corn is down at 9 to 4 cents. July corn is down at 5 to 8 cents. May beans are up at 3 to 6 cents. July beans are up at 6 to 8 cents. Kansas City wheat is higher for today. KC May wheat is up at 4 to 8 cents. KC July wheat is up at 3 to 4 cents. Chicago wheat is up for this afternoon. Chicago May wheat is up at 3 to 6 cents. Chicago September wheat is up at 9 to 6 cents. Livestock markets are up for today's close. June cattle is up at 5 to 10 cents. August cattle is up at 4 to 6 cents. May feeder cattle is up at 3 to 4 cents. July feeder is up at 5 to 10 cents. June hogs is down at 8 to 6 cents. August hogs is down at 3 to 5 cents. This been your commodities markets update for this afternoon. I'm joining with Brad Summa from the USDA field office in St. Louis. He is a statistician at the USDA. How's going on with the planting date in Missouri and Illinois?
Good morning, Caesar. Yeah, I would say as a statistician, I would say we are off to a pretty average start. And we've had some mixed weather. We got pretty dry last fall, so I think there was concern about the soil moisture, but we've kind of caught up. We've had some really good rains here recently, and so I think the soil moisture has been replenished to a large extent. But as far as my two states, I oversee Missouri and Illinois. And just looking at Illinois, for example, the corn planted as of Sunday had reached 7% compared to the 5-year average of 11. So we're down just a little bit compared to normal. But the soybean planting is at 10% already, whereas the 5-year average is 7. So we're up there. So it's kind of a mixed bag in Illinois. In Missouri, we're up in both. Corn, we're already at 33%. and which is up 8% from the 5-year average of 25. And soybeans, we are 15% planted compared to the 5-year average of 6. So we're up 9 points there. So yeah, we're off to a decent start, I would say. And I would also add, I am continually amazed at how fast farmers can get things done when they have that window of opportunity. I've seen years where you'll have weeks of rain and wet weather and things kind of get behind. And then they have that brief window of opportunity where things dry out. And man, they can make up for lost time really quickly. It's those really big planters and tractors, I guess, that can get through those fields quickly and get things caught up. So it's neat to watch from my perspective.
How is the weather in metro area in Arkansas, Kentucky, because of the flooding for the last couple weeks ago?
Oh, I haven't followed those areas as much. My territory is Missouri and Illinois, so I really don't know a whole lot other than what, we've all seen in the news. It looks pretty devastating. Of course, the thing I tell farmers and people interested in the crop progress planting, the flooding generally occurs along the rivers. The cropland acres that is along the rivers is a fairly small proportion of the overall cropland. So for the folks that are displaced, it's devastating. For the big picture, as far as crop production, it's not as devastating as it may seem because there's a small percent of that cropland that's actually close to a river that's flooding. We see this a lot of times in flood years. People think there's just, the crop's going to be devastated. But again, things dry out fast. Farmers can get back in the fields and make up for time quickly. And there's just not a huge chunk of cropland that is subject to that flooding near the rivers.
For sure. Let's discuss about the planting season with our audience about it. Can describe the condition like the soil, temperature, and weather.
So yeah, I know farmers look for that ideal combination of temperature and weather. They try to look for a soil moisture of at least 50 degrees, preferably 60 or even higher, and try to avoid freeze days. You never can predict when that last freeze is going to be. It can be pretty devastating. But we really see a lot of things really get going in mid late April and early May. Again, if it's dry enough to get out in the fields. But there's a lot of planting that can happen in June. We will do a survey in June, and a lot of times we find out there's still a lot of planting to be done, especially in wet years and especially for soybeans. I think most guys try to get that corn in a little earlier than soybeans, especially if there's risk of not getting something planted, because I think corn typically needs more growing days than soybeans. But yeah, the temperatures are pretty normal right now. We've had some hit and miss rains, pretty wet right now, but it generally doesn't take too long to dry out, and they'll be out there again.
Can you describe on the planting progress in southern Illinois near Carbondale, Brett?
I can't really speak to that specific area. All I have in front of me right now is the statewide picture. And again, statewide, the corn planted as of Sunday was 7% compared to the 5-year average of 11. Soybeans planted was 10% compared to the 5-year average of 7. On bins or on a rail car or on a barge, and I just enjoy being a part of that.
For sure. Don't forget about the biofuels industry.
Yeah, that's really taken off in my lifetime. The ethanol plants, the diesel plants, and being able to produce a renewable energy and just make other uses of our grains. I'm amazed at what they continue to find new uses for soybeans for everything from plastics to food material. I mean, it's just amazing what they continue to find ways to use our grain for. But yeah, biofuels is
What is your
certainly a
thoughts
big
on
part of
this
that.
spring? What is your thoughts on this spring?
On this spring, well, I'm cautiously optimistic that we're going to get everything planted. Like I said, it's kind of wet right now. You're always concerned when it starts raining if it's going to stop and things get
Oh,
planted. Like in 2019, we had a big prevent plant year, and that was very concerning when you see major flooding and a lot of fields that just don't get planted. But again, there are programs to help mitigate that and give farmers some relief. Um, but overall, temperatures are pretty normal. The rainfalls are pretty normal. As long as we get a few more windows of opportunity here, get some dry weather, I'm optimistic the farmers are going to get the planting done and be off to a really good start.
do you have any final thoughts on the balance sheet on May 12th? Brad,
Uh, I don't really. I'll just say, we're constantly looking at stocks. What determines the value of a grain commodity are really two things. It's what is likely coming down the pipeline. And right now, we have an estimate as to what farmers intend to plant. We'll see if it actually happens, depending on the weather. The other thing is stocks. And so we constantly are monitoring the stocks and what's being used and drawn down, either here in America versus and what's being exported to other countries. And so those two things play a huge role in the price. And so we're always interested in what comes out in those grain stocks reports to see how that's affecting the balance sheet.
thanks, Brad.
You're welcome, Caesar. It's great to get to visit with you today. And I thank you for the time and the interest in what NAS does for farmers and the ag community.
We've been talking with Brad Summa from the USDA field office in St. Louis, Missouri. We'll talk about the commodities markets, especially in uncertainty with ag trade and the stock markets for right now with Nick Lawrence from Traders, PhD. Welcome to the show on Back Roads of Illinois.
Glad to be here, Caesar.
Nick, what is your thoughts with the corn markets, especially in the technical side in place for right now?
So for me, I would say, corn, technically speaking, we've retraced about 62% of the sell-off we had there from mid-February to the beginning of March. Seemed to carve out a little bit of a low there at about 450. And then like I said, retraced about 61% of it. So I would say here, heading into first notice day on the May, a pullback here in the first notice day in the beginning part of March, I don't think is uncalled for or unrealistic. And technically speaking, the core market's still technically in an uptrend, and hopefully we can resume things here once we get into May and maybe even into June.
How is the fundamentals on the bean side?
Fundamentally speaking, on the bean side of things, I think the market is trying to decide, these lower acres we're going to have mixed with, relatively high domestic crush, um, and less imports of, you know, biofuel feedstocks, things of that nature. I think the market's really trying to weigh all these bearish and bullish items, but against each other. I think again, really to flip on you and go to the technical side, beans could have some pressure here, obviously going into first notice day. And then once we get into our weather market, um, depending on how acres and um, our domestic crush turns out and everything, um, I think it could have a little excitement too in late May, mid June.
Do you consider that we have some concerns about the beans demand to China with the trade deficit?
Um, yeah, I don't think it's the main concerns there. That's been the same for a good handful of years now, and I don't think that's changed. Um, if anything, the past couple days have shown that possibly the door's kind of cracked there for the U.S. and China to start negotiating something. We do know that's probably going to take a very long time. But still, I think that the door being cracked there and the possibility of tariffs coming off and maybe both countries showing a little bit of good faith and getting back to business, that could be a positive thing. So I am curious to wonder if maybe the majority of the bad news is priced in, and maybe we've seen a little more watermark, and hopefully we can build a little bit of a short term support here and again have some better pricing opportunities come June.
What is the main concern for right now, Nick?
The main concern, shoe. The main concern, there's quite a bit of them. See, obviously trade. Trade, I think, is the biggest one of the market. Um, and unless we see some improvement there, I think we're going to struggle. It would be nice. Allegedly, there's at least 18 countries with trade deals on paper. And man, if we could get some of those to come to fruition, and they include a good portion of ags, that'd be a cool drink of water for the market, and it could be exciting.
It is a hard question. I apologize for that.
Oh no, I don't think, yeah, no, I think that's a fair question. There's obviously a lot of concerns today. Um, but to answer your question pointedly, I would say, or undoubtedly the biggest concern today.
How is the fundamentals on the cattle markets?
I mean, the fundamentals on the cattle market, I mean, that is something else. We've got, if anything, I think the fundamentals have done nothing but get more and more bullish, right? I mean, our domestic supply of just the cattle herd in general hasn't grown. If anything, this past winter, one of the things that has been keeping us kind of afloat on being able to produce beef was feeder cattle imports, and those went to zero for an entire quarter. I think that's gonna matter eventually. And then with some of these, with tariffs restricting imports of goods, importing beef, I think is going to get more expensive and harder. Um, and and Trump is on the record of saying, he doesn't want to import beef anyway. He wants to export it. So our fundamentals are most definitely strong, and I think it could get even stronger. I mean, really, it sounds crazy, but it potentially could get even more bullish, I guess you could say.
How is the May feeder cattle? It's up, but how can we expect to see the prices are high?
Um, I guess ask that one more time.
How is the May feeder cattle?
Oh, the main thing for cattle. Really, I think the main topic for the cattle market right now is really trying to price in um, future demand, based on what they're saying in the what's the potential economy basically in anywhere from you know 3 months to a year, you know, and trying to guess what's the economy going to look like. You've got you know domestic GDP prediction reductions. You've got global GDP prediction reductions. Um, so right now I think the trade's just trying to understand, where we're going to be come, summertime and, maybe even a year from now. And so I think really that's what the market's doing right now. I think it's less about the fundamentals and more about the future fundamentals, basically.
Do you have any final thoughts about the agricultural trade?
I would say, final thoughts here on the grains, expect pressure here over the next week or so. And then really be looking for our next marketing opportunity come, mid-May to, June sometime. Um, you know, th- that's going to be, our next selling opportunity. Really keep an eye on, weather models there. Obviously, that's going to be the final driver. Um, and really, other than that, stuff we can't predict, but we just got to kind of keep an eye on is what happens here. With some of these trade deals over the next 30 to 60 days, and hopefully, cooler heads can prevail, and we can get some trade deals done.
Thanks, Nick.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
This is Nick Lawrence from Traders, PhD on Back Roads. Thanks to Brian Summa from the USDA field office in St. Louis. And also thanks to Nick Lawrence from Traders, PhD. This has been Back Roads of Illinois. I'm Cesar Delgado. You have a good day.